Hey everyone, welcome back to the Semper AI Daily Digest. It is Wednesday, April 8th, and today feels like one of those days where the AI industry stops acting like a product launch machine and starts acting like geopolitics. We have Anthropic unveiling Mythos preview, OpenAI launching a safety fellowship, Google Gemini showing up in a very human use case as a personal trainer, and a much bigger question underneath all of it, which is this: are frontier labs finally admitting that the real race is not just capability, but control?
Right, and that is why today's lineup matters. This is not just another pile of model updates and feature tweaks. And we've got a new system card for Anthropic's Mythos preview, a very public statement that they do not want to broadly release it, an enterprise security initiative attached to it, and then OpenAI stepping in on the other side of the spectrum, saying essentially we also need more people working on safety and alignment. So today is less, wow, look at the shiny demo, and more. Okay, how are the labs trying to shape the next phase of power?
Exactly. This is a dense one, but it's a good one. So let's start with the biggest story of the day, and honestly, maybe the most revealing one.
Anthropic has published the system card for Claude Mythos preview, and system cards matter because they're one of the few moments where an AI company has to stop marketing and start explaining itself.
Yes, a product page says, "Look how amazing this thing is." A system card says, "Here is what we think it can do. Here is how we tested it. Here is what worries us. And here is where it might break." It's the lab equivalent of showing your work instead of just circling the answer.
And that distinction is important. When a lab publishes a system card, it's giving researchers, policy people, enterprise buyers, and frankly competitors a structured view into how the company is thinking about risk. Not perfect transparency, but more than slogans.
So what stands out here is not just that Mythos preview exists, it's that Anthropic is framing it as a frontier capability that has to be handled carefully. That alone tells you they want the conversation to land on responsibility, not merely capability.
And I think there are two layers to that. On the surface, a system card helps external audiences assess credibility. Underneath that, it also helps Anthropic position itself against the rest of the field. They're saying, we build strong models, but we also document them seriously. That is a governance signal as much as a technical one.
Which, to be fair, is smart. Because once model performance starts clustering at the top, the differentiation shifts. It's not just who has the most impressive benchmarks, it's who seems most trustworthy to governments, large enterprises, critical infrastructure operators, and cautious buyers.
Especially after the last year where the market learned a few hard lessons. Number one, model releases can move faster than institutions can adapt. Number two, the more powerful the system, the less acceptable it is to just shrug and say, we'll patch it later.
Right. Nobody wants the aviation version of frontier AI where we build the plane in public while it's already in the air. The system card is Anthropic saying no, we're at least trying to publish the maintenance manual while the engine is being tested.
I would just add one caution. Publishing a system card is good. It is not the same thing as solving the problem. Documentation can be substantive or it can be reputational theater. The real question is whether the safeguards, evaluations, and operational choices actually match the seriousness of the document.
Totally fair. But even with that caveat, it still matters that Anthropic is choosing to foreground the safety framing here. In a lot of tech cycles, the temptation is to lead with wow. Anthropic is leading with, here are the constraints.
And that may become increasingly normal. As these systems get more capable, responsible labs are going to need a launch package that includes technical evidence, policy language, partner selection, and explicit limits on deployment. Not because that is morally elegant, but because the stakes are getting commercial and political.
So the headline takeaway on Mythos preview is this: the model is important, but the release posture may be even more important. Anthropic is telling us what kind of actor it wants to be.
And it's also telling us that Frontier Labs now expect audiences to care about safety architecture as part of the product itself.
Which brings us to headline number 2, and this one made my eyebrows go up. Anthropic says its run rate revenue has surpassed $30 billion, up from $9 billion at the end of 2025.
That is a huge jump, and if accurate, it says something very clear about enterprise demand. People can debate hype all day, but revenue at that scale means companies are not just experimenting, they're buying, deploying, and budgeting around these systems.
Exactly. A lot of people still talk about AI as if it's a future market. $30 billion in run rate says, No, this is an operating market now. That is not a science project. That is a force.
And Anthropic specifically ties that growth to demand for Claude and to a partnership that gives them the compute to keep pace. That last part matters. Revenue is one side of the story. Compute is the bottleneck that decides whether you can actually serve the demand you created.
It's like opening a wildly successful restaurant and then realizing you only have one stove. Congratulations on demand. Now can you deliver dinner?
Exactly. Frontier AI has this unusual shape where product success and infrastructure dependency are tightly fused. You cannot separate model adoption from access to chips, data centers, energy, and strategic partnerships. If demand spikes faster than compute supply, the winner can still feel constrained.
Which is why I read this revenue announcement as more than flexing. Yes, it's a power move, but it's also a message to the market that scale economics are becoming real. The labs with strong enterprise pull and reliable compute access are gaining altitude fast.
And that has second order effects. It changes negotiating leverage with enterprise buyers. It changes talent recruitment. It changes the confidence investors and partners have in your roadmap. It also changes the urgency for competitors who cannot yet show that kind of monetization.
There's another angle too. When a company announces revenue growth that dramatic, it forces people to update their priors about where the money is in AI. Maybe consumer chat is the flashy front door, but enterprise workflows, developer tooling, infrastructure partnerships, and custom deployments may be where the real economic engine is maturing.
I think that is probably right. The public discourse still leans heavily on consumer products because they're visible, but the larger budgets are often moving behind the scenes into internal co-pilots, support systems, code workflows, document analysis, security operations, and knowledge tasks at scale.
Which makes today's Anthropic news feel like a 1-2 punch. On one hand, Mythos preview says we are serious about frontier capability. On the other hand, 30 billion run rate says the commercial machine behind that capability is not hypothetical.
And when those two things combine, safety questions become less academic. If frontier models are already tied to very large business adoption, then deployment choices today can propagate very quickly through the economy.
That is such an important point. Once these systems are deeply embedded in work, you are not just launching software, you are modifying operating systems for organizations.
And that is why compute partnerships, safety framing, and revenue growth all belong in the same conversation. They are pieces of one larger system.
All right. Headline number 3. OpenAI is introducing a safety fellowship, a new program supporting independent research on AI safety and alignment. And honestly, I'm glad to see this, because one of the weirdest dynamics in AI right now is that the need for safety talent is obvious, but the pathways into meaningful work are still too narrow.
Yes, if you want stronger safety research, you need more than statements. You need people, funding, mentorship, access, and a way for talented researchers to contribute without already being inside one of a handful of elite institutions.
Exactly. A fellowship can do a few useful things. It can legitimize the field for new researchers. It can create a talent pipeline. It can bring in fresh perspectives from academia or adjacent disciplines. And it can signal that safety is not just an internal compliance function, but an area worthy of first-class investment.
The phrase I keep coming back to is capacity building. AI safety conversations often jump straight to principles, regulation, or model behavior. Those matter, but none of it goes very far if the world simply does not have enough people with the right mix of technical depth and practical understanding.
Right, because alignment is not going to be solved by vibes. You need researchers who can think clearly about evaluations, red teaming, interpretability, misuse, reliability, incentives, and deployment strategy. And you need enough of them.
I also like the independent research angle. In the healthier the ecosystem, the less safety work depends on one company's internal framing. External researchers can ask uncomfortable questions, test assumptions, and produce analysis that does not have to serve a product launch calendar.
That independence is huge. If the only people evaluating frontier models are the people shipping them, that is a structural tension. Not necessarily bad faith, but definitely tension.
At the same time, fellowships are not magic. The quality will depend on who gets supported, what access they receive, how open the outputs are, and whether this becomes a sustained investment rather than a one-cycle announcement.
Fair. But in a week, where one major lab is publishing a system card and another is expanding the safety talent pipeline, the broader theme is hard to miss. safety is no longer a side panel to the AI story. It is becoming part of the main stage branding, policy, and workforce strategy.
And that may be one of the most consequential changes in the industry this year.
All right, let's move into the main stories, because this is where the Mythos narrative gets even more interesting. Anthropic says it does not plan to make Mythos Preview generally available. Its goal is to deploy Mythos-class models safely at scale, but first, it needs safeguards that reliably block the most dangerous outputs, and testing of those safeguards will begin with an upcoming Claude Opus model.
That is a very revealing statement. It means Anthropic is explicitly separating capability from broad distribution. Just because a model can do something does not mean they want everybody using it yet.
Which is fascinating because the industry spent years training people to expect the opposite. Better model appears, broader access follows, maybe with a waitlist and a keynote. Anthropic is saying, not so fast.
And I think there are practical reasons for that. Once a highly capable system is widely available, risk is no longer limited to lab conditions or trusted partners. You have to assume adversarial use, unpredictable misuse, and organizational overconfidence by users who think the system is more reliable than it is.
Right. Capability plus scale equals weird failure modes showing up in places you did not anticipate. If a model is powerful enough to materially improve offensive cyber work, manipulation, or other dangerous outputs, then general release becomes a totally different decision than just adding a fun image feature.
The upcoming Opus-based safeguards test is also worth watching. That suggests Anthropic wants to pressure test some safety mechanisms in a related but presumably more controllable deployment pathway before something Mythos class goes wider.
Sort of like testing a new braking system on a performance car before you put it on a race vehicle that can go much faster.
That's a decent analogy. It tells us they're thinking in stages. Not all frontier capabilities should go from lab to mass market in one jump.
And honestly, even if you're someone who wants maximum openness and rapid access, this is still useful data. It means the frontier labs themselves are signaling that model capability may be outrunning current safety confidence.
Which is exactly why people should take this seriously. When a lab declines to broadly release a powerful preview, that is not just caution theater. It may also be an implicit statement about how close we are getting to uncomfortable thresholds.
Main story 2 stays on this theme. Anthropic points people to a detailed technical report on software vulnerabilities and exploits discovered by Claude Mythos Preview.
And this is where the conversation gets very concrete. Software vulnerability discovery is one of those domains where frontier AI can be incredibly valuable and genuinely risky at the same time. The same capability that helps defenders find problems faster can also lower the cost of offensive discovery if misused.
Exactly. This is dual use in giant flashing neon letters. If the model can identify subtle vulnerabilities at a very high level, that is amazing for defense and also potentially alarming for offense.
Which is why a technical report matters. It gives people a way to assess what kind of exploit reasoning or vulnerability analysis is actually being claimed, rather than relying on vague marketing language like groundbreaking or transformative.
And it also reframes the AI race a little. For a while, the public storyline was mostly chatbots, co-pilots, assistants, coding. Now we are seeing more of the national infrastructure angle, where models are positioned as tools for securing critical systems.
That shift has consequences. Security use cases tend to invite government interest, enterprise partnerships, and tougher questions about who gets access. They also increase the pressure for robust logging, abuse prevention, and careful deployment boundaries.
Because if your model is good enough to meaningfully assist vulnerability research, it is no longer just a productivity tool. It starts to look like strategic infrastructure.
And strategic infrastructure does not get treated casually for long.
All right, story 3 is lighter on the surface, but actually kind of profound. Google Gemini gets highlighted as a personal trainer, with someone saying the sessions it helps with are next level. Now, to be clear, this is not an official benchmark announcement. It's more of a usage signal, an anecdotal example, but I think it captures something real.
I agree. This is not the kind of story you headline as proof of dominance, but it is a useful indicator of where AI is becoming sticky in everyday life. People are increasingly using models not just for search or writing help, but for coaching, accountability, planning, motivation, and interpretation.
Yes. The interesting part is not whether Gemini is literally the best trainer on Earth. It's that people are turning to these systems for structured, personalized guidance in areas that feel human and behavioral.
And that opens both opportunity and caution. On the opportunity side, AI can provide consistency, personalization, memory, and round-the-clock availability. On the caution side, health and fitness are domains where bad advice can matter, and users can overtrust a system that sounds confident.
Which means the big story here is less, wow, an AI did a workout plan, and more, wow, the boundary between assistant and coach keeps moving.
Exactly. If people start relying on AI for routines, habits, learning plans, nutrition guidance, mental framing, or performance feedback, then product quality is not just about cleverness anymore. It's about judgment, boundaries, and when the system should encourage a user to consult a real professional.
I also think it points to where consumer AI may become durable. Not generic chat for its own sake, but recurring use cases where the model becomes part of a personal operating rhythm.
That's the word rhythm. The products that win may be the ones that fit into repeat behavior, not just novelty.
Story 4. Back to Anthropic. Project Glasswing, an urgent initiative to help secure the world's most critical software, powered by Mythos Preview.
This is a very strong framing choice. Not merely we have a powerful model, instead we are applying it to the security of critical software systems. That invites a much broader audience, from enterprises to policymakers to infrastructure maintainers.
And the name matters too. Project names like this are designed to carry weight. They sound mission-oriented, cross-sector, urgent. It positions the effort as coordinated defense, not just product commercialization.
The thing I'm watching here is whether the initiative stays substantive, if it includes real partner workflows, measurable vulnerability discovery, disciplined access controls, and transparent reporting. It could matter a lot. If it's mostly branding, then the impact will be thinner than the language suggests.
But even if we take the announcement at face value, it still says something important about the market. AI companies increasingly want to be seen not just as software vendors, but as essential actors in resilience and national-scale digital security.
Which also means governments and critical industries will be evaluating them differently. Once you step into security claims about the systems on which the world depends, you are in a higher trust, higher scrutiny category.
And if Anthropic can show that Mythos-class systems materially help defenders find and fix flaws faster, that could become one of the most compelling enterprise narratives in AI, because it ties model capability directly to risk reduction.
Yes, and that is easier to justify economically than many consumer use cases. Security budgets can be substantial when the value proposition is credible.
Story 5 extends Glasswing with a partner list that includes Amazon Web Services, Apple, Broadcom, Cisco, CrowdStrike, Google, JP Morgan Chase, the Linux Foundation, Microsoft, NVIDIA, and Palo Alto Networks. That is not a casual list.
No, it is not. And partner lists like that serve several functions at once. They add legitimacy, they signal ecosystem alignment, and they show that the company is not trying to enter a sensitive domain alone.
It's basically the Avengers of big tech infrastructure and security logos.
Slightly dramatic, but yes, it's an attention-grabbing coalition. The strategic implication is that AI-enabled security may become a cooperative layer across otherwise competing firms. Everyone benefits if critical software becomes more resilient.
Also, when you see the Linux Foundation in there, alongside cloud giants, chip giants, security giants, and finance, it suggests they want coverage across both proprietary and open-source infrastructure. That's important, because so much of modern software rests on shared foundations that are underfunded and over-depended on.
And that connects to one of the most meaningful parts of today's set of announcements. The Frontier Labs are not just talking about models in the abstract. They are trying to embed themselves in institutions, ecosystems, and infrastructures that matter.
Which raises a broader question. Are we moving from AI as an app layer to AI as a systems layer?
I think we are, at least in some domains, and when that happens, trust, governance, interoperability, and accountability all get more important very quickly.
All right, let's hit the quick hits, because even the shorter items today are pretty telling.
First quick hit, Anthropic says it is committing up to $100 million in Mythos Preview usage credits for partners and more than 40 organizations that maintain critical software, including open source projects.
That is a smart move. Credits are not just generosity. They're adoption accelerants. They lower the friction for experimentation, let partners test serious workflows, and help Anthropic gather real-world signal from meaningful use cases.
And the open source angle matters. Some of the most critical digital infrastructure in the world is maintained by relatively small teams. If frontier AI can genuinely help those maintainers find issues faster, that could be high leverage, but again, success depends on whether the tooling is usable, trustworthy, and properly scoped.
Second quick hit. Microsoft Research has a new research focus covering LLM sentiment in cultural context, robot assembly learning, smarter AI agents, verified Rust code, and CHI 2026 work.
I like this one because it's a reminder that the AI story is bigger than frontier lab launches. Research ecosystems are still doing the quieter work that shapes what becomes practical later, especially around embodied systems, coding assurance, and agent behavior.
And verified Rust code especially catches my eye because we're entering the era where code generation is common, and the demand for stronger correctness guarantees is only going to rise.
Exactly. Generating code is one thing. Generating code you can trust is a very different challenge.
Before we wrap, I want to zoom out because today had a clear pattern. Anthropic publishes a system card, says Mythos preview won't be generally available, points to security research, launches a critical software initiative, names heavyweight partners, and offers large usage credits. OpenAI launches a safety fellowship. Google shows another glimpse of AI moving into personal guidance and coaching behavior.
Put all of that together and the trend looks pretty clear. The market is maturing from what can the model do to where should it be deployed, who should use it, under what conditions, and with what safeguards. Capability is still central, but governance is moving much closer to the core product story.
Which, honestly, was always going to happen. Once AI starts touching software security, critical infrastructure, core enterprise workflows, and personal guidance, you cannot keep treating safety and deployment discipline like optional accessories.
And I think there's one more takeaway for business leaders. If you're watching these announcements and wondering what they mean for your company, the answer is not simply pick a model. The answer is start building a framework for evaluating AI systems based on fit, risk, transparency, and operational reliability, not just raw demos.
Yes. Ask what the model is good at. Ask what it should not do. Ask how it fails. Ask what logs exist. Ask whether the vendor is serious about documentation. Ask whether the economics are stable. And ask whether your people know how to use it responsibly.
Because the companies that benefit most from this next phase will probably not be the ones that chase every announcement. They'll be the ones that build disciplined adoption habits while the landscape is still shifting.
And for builders, researchers, and operators, today is a reminder that the frontier is no longer just flashy. It is infrastructural, it is institutional, and increasingly, it is political.
Which means the winners will not just be the labs with the smartest models, they'll also be the ones that earn trust across deployment contexts that actually matter.
That is a perfect place to land it. If you enjoyed today's episode, subscribe so you don't miss tomorrow's digest. We're tracking the real shifts, not just the loudest posts.
And if someone on your team wants a clear daily read on what matters in AI without doom scrolling for 3 hours, send them this show.
Thanks for listening. Stay curious, stay sharp, and we'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.